The story revolves around the actions of characters. These are the people whose stories are being told. Sometimes it could be just one person, one main character in his journey. Other times it may be up to 8, 12 characters. And not all of them will play the same part in the story, but they all deserve some attention in the story, and there will be a reason for that. The main character is the protagonist. This is the hero or the person that the reader or the audience is meant to identify with. When we read a book, we want to root for the protagonist. We want him or her to finish his journey and be changed somehow, become a better person, accomplish his goal. So the story generally revolves around him or her and his journey. The antagonist is the opposite of the protagonist. He or she or it is in direct conflict with the protagonist. Now, most commonly, this is usually a villain who is directly trying to impede every action the protagonist is taking in achieving his mission. However, protagonist does not necessarily have to be a villain. Sometimes a protagonist can be a more softer character. It could be a mother figure who doesn't appear necessarily criminal or vicious in any way, but in some way is impeding our protagonist from achieving his or her mission. Sometimes it can also be an issue, a conflict. It could be war, it could be city, it could be time. So the antagonist has a little bit more leeway as far as how he or she or it is embodied in the story. The protagonist, though, and the antagonist are in direct opposition to each other throughout the story. There's going to be a consistent tension throughout the story between our protagonist and his journey and whatever opposition is in his way. All of the obstacles that are stopping him from achieving his mission are part of the protagonist's plan. But the antagonist and protagonist are round characters, which means they will both have fully developed and identifiable personalities, attitudes, desires, motivations, traits, and flaws. We are going to see these characters change, which gives the reason for why we call them round. We see them as more three-dimensional characters. These are the kind of characters, when well written and well crafted, you will remember forever. They become part of our social context. They become part of our history. So many characters from Shakespeare's plays are like that because he has written them so well, and so we feel like we know them as individual people. That's a sign of excellent craft. Flat characters are quite the opposite. They are characters in the story whose personalities are probed in much less depth. We don't need to know much about the flat characters. A lot of them are there just to be a point of reaction for our protagonist or antagonist, or to show how our other characters react to the setting or other characters around them. Some of the flat characters, are stock characters. Stock characters are typically stereotypical characters, as in the example of Gulliver's Travels, or some stereotypical characters from Shakespeare's plays. Stock characters do play an important part in the story because they exemplify a typical attitude or way of life that we are used to seeing. Something in the story has to be relatable to us. So archetypes in general, we like to relate to them because we understand them. A mother figure, a father figure, a nurse, a maid, a jester, a joker, or a magician. These kind of stock characters inherit stereotypical qualities, but are important to the story. In William Shakespeare's Othello, the antagonist and protagonist is very clear. Othello is our protagonist. We wish him well in his journey. And Iago, one of the most famous villains of all of Shakespearean literature, this terrible personality, he's constantly plotting Othello's downfall. The two of them are constantly in conflict. A dynamic character is one who changes so drastically in the course of the story that it's even above and beyond a round character. Because a dynamic character changes almost 180 degrees from who we first saw. A great example of this is the Ebenezer Scrooge character in Christmas Carol. In that story, it is so clear how we see this bitter miser and how he changes into an amazingly generous and helpful person. A static character is the opposite, one whose attitudes and behaviors remain fairly consistent throughout the story. In some examples, a protagonist can be static. which may be why he's creating so much conflict and opposition with the antagonist. So when you're reading stories, try to determine who's the protagonist here. What is his or her source of conflict or opposition? And there you'll find your antagonist, whether it is an actual object, a situation, or another person. You'll be careful with this as you answer the questions and do the readings.